I want to say a few words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, about this withdrawal agreement that is about to be passed, I fear, later on this afternoon, and I want to summarise some of the reasons that I will be voting against it. It does contain still this trapdoor to no deal at the end of this year, and despite everything that has been said from the government front bench, I fail to understand why they are so doggedly remaining with this 11-month period, an entirely arbitrary period, to say that that is the period within which they want to have agreed a new trade agreement. The President of the Commission just said yesterday that that is not going to yield the kind of deep agreement that apparently the Prime Minister wants. And so it's very hard to see how this is actually in the best interests of the country. Secondly, I worry deeply about the race to the bottom on social and environmental standards that I think is at the heart of this withdrawal agreement. We heard again yesterday when we raised these in the debate that there is no guarantee against regression on environmental standards. There's certainly no dynamic alignment being suggested, and indeed what I fear we will see is a wrecking ball being brought to precious environmental standards in particular, upon which we have been absolutely dependent on our negotiations in the EU to achieve. The Prime Minister, of course, has famously said that Brexit is an opportunity to, in his words, regulate differently. I will in just a moment. When he says that he wants to regulate differently, I find it very hard to believe that he actually means improving regulations when it comes to environment in particular.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way, and she's raising two very important issues, the importance of which I think is recognised in all quarters of the House. I just wonder on what she's basing, from what she's heard in debates or in our party manifesto or in anything else, on what is she basing these fears, other than shroud-waving and her own prejudice?
I would argue that I'm basing my fears on the fact that, for example, I was a member of the European Parliament for 10 years, and I regularly saw how the British government, often, and indeed the Conservatives, not necessarily the government, but Conservative MEPs, Conservative MEPs were the ones who were watering down. I appreciate it was a Labour government. I misspoke. I meant... It feels as if the Conservatives have been in power for so long that it's easy to actually forget that they haven't. What I want to say, and let me say correctly, that what I witnessed over my 10 years in the European Parliament was Conservative MEPs constantly trying to water down the positions on the environment that the European Parliament was taking, and therefore, not until I finished answering the other one, no. So what I want to be able to say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in response to the first person who has intervened upon me and who I have not yet finished answering, that my concern about what will happen to environmental standards under the withdrawal bill are not being dictated by dogma. They are being dictated by my experience in the European Parliament for 10 years, watching Conservative MEPs constantly trying to water down the kind of environmental regulations. And as a fellow former MEP, I will happily give way to her.
Lady for giving way, and as a former Conservative MEP and as a former member of the Environment Committee of the European Parliament and as a former chair of a committee of the European Parliament, may I completely refute the allegations she has just made. It was Conservative MEPs who led the negotiations at the Paris climate change that led to the global commitments to deal with the emissions that are threatening our planet, and it will be a Conservative British government that will lead the negotiations for the next global climate change conference that will save our planet.
Well, I think the Honourable Lady doth protest a little too much, because the reality was that again and again I saw the briefings that were being provided by the Conservative Party to Conservative MEPs, and they were all about watering down key environmental legislation. I was the rapporteur, for example, for a piece of legislation around illegally logged timber, and I can assure her that it was Tory MEPs on that file and on many others that were actually watering it down. And I'm not going to give away to her again, no, because this isn't a very constructive conversation. I am very sure about the position that I am taking. No, she can sit down. No.
Carry on.
The fourth thing I wanted to say